Should I stay or should I go? Shelach 5781. Years ago, I asked a colleague about a position at a certain Jewish institution, and he said to me, Stephen, it's an Eretz Ochelet Yeshvecha, a land that devours its inhabitants. That's rabbinic lingo for don't take the job, don't even think about taking this job. They will devour you alive, they'll eat you alive. Question is, why do the Meraglim, the spies, say that Eretz Canaan, Eretz Yisrael is an Eretz Ochela Yeshvecha, a land that devours its inhabitants? After all, they had just told the people, V'gam zavat chalav udavashi. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. If it's a land flowing with milk and honey, how can it also be a land which devours its inhabitants? The Talmud in Sotah explains. It says that God did the Meraglim, the spies, a tova, a favor, a goodness, a kindness when they entered Canaan. He plagued the Canaanites, so the Canaanites were busy with funerals, burying their dead, and they didn't see these spies, these Israelite spies, running around spying on them. But instead, these 10 spies turned that kindness into a weapon against God. And they told the people, all we saw is funerals when we entered the land. It's a horrible land. People die all the time. Who would want to go to a land like that? The question is why? Why did they slander the land and say, Lo nuchala alot el ha'am ki hazak hu mimenu? We can't go up, for the Canaanites, are stronger than we are. No, maybe the Canaanites were stronger than the Israelites are, but the Israelites had God on their side. God who had been protecting them, assuring them victory after victory. The Talmud continues and explains the verse can be read differently. Instead of reading it, the Canaanites are stronger than we are, it can be read, Ki hazak hu mimenu. The Canaanites, are stronger than God is. In other words, these spies are actually saying the Canaanites are stronger than God, our God. Wait a minute. How in the world could these 10 spies make that claim? God, the God of Israel, had swatted the mighty Egyptians like they were a fly. Suddenly he can't beat some petty Canaanite kings in the backwater of Canaan. Give me a break. Of course he can. By the way, the Haftorah, in a sense, in a very subtle way, mocks the spies here, these 10 spies. In the Haftorah, later on, Joshua, sends his own 2 spies to spy out Jericho. The security forces in Jericho are alerted to the fact that Israelite spies were running around the city spying on them. But Rahav, who lived in Jericho, a woman who lived in Jericho, an innkeeper, the Talmud says she was actually a zonah, a lady of ill repute, hid the spies. Why? Because she understood that the God of Israel was strong. And if he wanted the Israelites to have a land, they would have the land. Therefore, she was going to throw her lot in with Bnei Israel, with the children of Israel. And later on, the rabbis suggest she actually married Joshua. Why could these 10 spies, these noble people of Israel, these leaders, not understand what Rahav, a member of the people of Jericho, could understand? Was it simply they lacked Amunah? It's kind of hard to believe. They had seen God perform so many miracles, ototim, teams, signs, and wonders on behalf of Bnei Israel. Suddenly, they're losing their Amunah, their faith. Question is, why? Why did they try to dissuade the people from entering Canaan, from taking Canaan? I think the issue is really an issue of complacency, inertia. The midbar, the wilderness, had become comfortable for the people. After all, they were surrounded by gods, and they kavod, his clouds of glory, which protected the people. God had showered them with man, the manna, the heavenly food. Sure, the people complained about it, but nevertheless, it tasted good. It was convenient. Life was easy for the people. In fact, later on, Yirmiyahu Jeremiah would look back and say, this was a honeymoon period between God and Israel. Of course, honeymoons come to an end. And entering Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, would be the end of the honeymoon. Real life would begin. No more bread from heaven. You'd have to work the land. You'd have to do what's necessary to build an infrastructure for society. Roads, fixing the potholes, differentiating between private property and public property, prisons, all the things you need for a functioning society. And I think that's, in a sense, why we saw yet another flare up from the Gaza Strip as Hamas again attacked Israeli civilians in a terrorist attack. Think about the difference between being a terrorist and a statesman. Being a terrorist is easy. You're trying to destroy something else, tear something else down, and terrorize the civilian population. On the other hand, to build a state, that's difficult. It's the art of statecraft, and it's not easy. You have to build functioning institutions, build a society. And unfortunately, what Abi Ibn said still holds true about never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Despite the fact the Israelis unilaterally withdrew from Gaza in 2005 and left the greenhouses, we know what happened. The Palestinians in the Gaza Strip destroyed the greenhouses. Instead of building a society, it's an Eretz Ochela Yeshvecha, a land that devours its inhabitants, literally using their own people as human shields as they engage in a terror campaign against Israel. And unfortunately, the international community also, in a sense, allows this to continue to happen. What's been the reaction from the international community? We must rebuild Gaza. Why must they rebuild Gaza? What happened to the idea of holding people responsible for their actions? Consequences, natural consequences. They start a terror war against Israel, and then you say to them, well, any damage the Israelis did while retaliating against you while trying to protect our civilians, suddenly we'll give you cash to rebuild? What are you doing? What's the message? You're only going to encourage them to do it again. Anybody who works with children realizes how bad of an idea this is. And by the way, do you really think most of the aid is going to go to humanitarian relief? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, three, four times, 10 times, shame on you. We've all seen this movie before. We know much of this money will be used to fund another round of terrorism. Now let's go a little closer to home. The pandemic has been horrific, but we've also become entrenched in new patterns. We've been living this way for over a year at this point. And as much as we want to get back to normal, transitioning back to normal can be difficult simply because we find ourselves entrenched in these relatively new, but not so new patterns anymore. Now, I'm not giving you medical advice. Speak to your doctor, listen to your doctor. But the fiasco of these Meraglim, these 10 spies, and the fiasco that befell the nation because of it, after all, they're condemned to wander the midbar, the wilderness, for 40 years and not enter the land. The fiasco reminds us that when the time is right, when you are cleared to go out, don't be afraid, la'alot, to go up, kadima, to go forward, as we say in Vahatikva. Don't be afraid to look for that next opportunity, whether it's professional, social, or romantic. That's the message we learned from the spies' mistake. Don't be afraid to seize the moment and go forward. On the other hand, there's a balance. We don't want to move simply for the sake of making a move. Perhaps you're in a good place professionally, socially, romantically. Of course, you always want to make things better. But if you're in a good place, you don't make a move simply to make a move. That was the mistake, on the other hand, Yitro made. Chazal, our sages, imagine that Yitro is the ultimate 60s flower child. He experiments with everything. When we meet him, he's a Kohen Minyan. He's a midnight priest. They believe that he experimented with every religion, every single thing. He was checking everything out. He went from one to the next. We see he comes and gives Moshe good advice on how to lead a people by establishing courts. So Moshe is taking some of the responsibility off his plate. And instead of sticking around, what does he do? He leaves. Not really surprising if you look at his name. Yitro, you hear another Hebrew word, common Hebrew word, yoter, which means additional. He's always looking for something new. It's always good to look for new things, things of interest. But if you're always going somewhere, at times you're really headed nowhere. When you find something good, stick with it and milk it for everything you can. Take advantage of the good. God did the spies a favor, and instead of taking advantage of the good, they turned it into a negative, and it was a disaster. It's a balancing act. When should you stay? When should you go? Listen to your heart. Often that gut feeling will tell you it's time to move on, or no, I'm in a good situation here. I'm going to stay and take advantage of it in a positive way as much as I can. If it's time to go, la'alot, to go, go up, go forward. And if it's time to stay, thank God you're in a good situation and enjoy it. Shabbat Shalom.